Hello everybody, Maven here, and it's finally that time. Yes, after so much work, the legendary hand cannon tier list video of 2024 is here. I've done this video before over a year ago, but it's time to update it. I said that when the Luna's Howl came out, we would do this, and so I'm sticking to my word, and here we are. So since this is going to be a longer video, we should probably do a few disclaimers first. Disclaimer number one. I had to think long and hard about how I was going to approach this video because I knew it would take super long to create, so I had to figure out a way to tackle it. Now, there are a lot of hand cannons in the game, and remember, in the final shape, Bungie is reverting sunsetting, meaning that you can technically put every single hand cannon in Destiny 2 history in this video, and technically it would be relevant. But obviously we're not going to do that because that would take a million years to create the video. So what we're going to do instead is this video is only going to contain hand cannons that are currently available to you right now, meaning you can log into Destiny today and get every single hand cannon that is shown in this video. And I believe that equates to about 40 hand cannons. So keep that in mind. And disclaimer number two, my judgment towards these hand cannons will probably be a little bit more harsh than the last tier list video I did. And that brings us to disclaimer number three, is that I will have a strong bias towards hand cannons that get explosive or timed payload. And any hand cannon that doesn't get those will be rated lower. And if you don't agree with that judgment, then you probably haven't been playing Destiny for a long time. I'm sorry to diss you like that, but it's true. Explosive payload and time payload are the best perks you can have on a hand cannon. They give just a flat out static plus 15% damage. They give pseudo infinite range. They give more ad clear potential, more flinch. It's just a no-brainer. They are the best perks. And disclaimer number four, a lot of these hand cannons won't get the screen time that they deserve in this video because there are 40 hand cannons to get to today, so some of the explanations have to be brief. We have to just get through this without having the video take an hour long. And disclaimer number five, the background gameplay in this video will be in the Hydroponics Delta because ads there are twice as tanky as raid ads, and it's about the equivalent of legend level content. But the background gameplay doesn't really mean much anyways, it's just filler gameplay to have on the screen so you have something to look at. But it's not really, we're not using the background gameplay as a comparison for these hand cannons, it's just there. Which brings us to the next disclaimer. In the background gameplay, I won't be using any surges, any radiant, no marksman's dodge, no subclass synergy, no unfair advantages. It's just gonna be the hand cannons as they are alone. And the final disclaimer, disclaimer number seven, I will leave timestamps down below to every single hand cannon used in this video if you'd like to skip around. Needless to say, making 40 timestamps took a long time, making 40 tier list graphics took a long time, and recording nearly 40 background gameplay clips took a long time. So if you appreciate the time and effort I went through to make this video, it'd mean a lot if you hit the like button and drop a comment because it really helps out a ton. I greatly appreciate it because it took like 30 hours of work. So now let's begin the tier list. Hope you enjoy. And one more disclaimer I forgot to mention, it's pretty self-explanatory at this point, but this is a PvE tier list. So let's start off with the Rose, and this one I'll put in the B tier. Now these are subject to change as we progress towards the end of the video, but for now it's getting a B tier. And one other bias I forgot to mention is that kinetic hand cannons are generally going to be better than energy ones because kinetic weapons do 10% more damage to unshielded combatants than energy weapons, and the Rose falls under that. But it also gets explosive payload, so bonus credit for both of those things. And also the Rose has a very solid base magazine size of 11, so with the backup mag you hit that maximum mag size of 14 without needing any mag boosting perks. And in the third column, it leaves a bit to be desired. It doesn't have the better mag boosting perks such as Subsistence, Rewind Rounds, Ambitious Assassin, but the next best thing would be Rapid Hit, and it does have that. So Rapid Hit Explosive Rose actually feels pretty good, not gonna lie. Next up is the Epochral Integration, and I'll put it down at the C tier. And this is a ritual hand cannon, so it doesn't have a lot of perk options. I mean, it has Incandescent, which is a fine ad clear perk, as you probably can tell by the Zaouli's Bane, except Zaouli's has Explosive, this doesn't. You can boost your reload speed with either Keep Away or Stats for All, but I feel like it's really not enough for this hand cannon to really be considered good and needs more help. Incandescent alone is not going to make it a good hand cannon. I'm sorry, Incandescent lovers. Next up is the Exalted Truth, and this one's getting slammed all the way down into the D tier. Now this hand cannon does get Frenzy, which I always say, in my opinion, is the best damage perk you can have on a PvE primary weapon, and I stand by that. However, the left column leaves a lot to be desired, and I mean a lot. There is nothing here that you would really want to go for PvE, and for some weird reason, they put Encore in the right side column. I don't know why. If they just nudge that over to the left, suddenly it'd be a pretty decent hand cannon, but it's definitely lacking in that first column. Next up, we got the D.F.A, and this one I'll put in the B tier right below the Rose. Now this one automatically gets bonus credit for not only being kinetic, but also having timed payload, but the Rose definitely shines more than this because of the bigger base mag size of 11. This one only has 9, so even if you put on an adept backup mag, you're only hitting 13, so it needs some help. You actually have to use that second column for a mag perk, whereas the Rose doesn't need to. Now the Rose's rapid hit I would also say is better than any perk options that the D.F.A has in the third column. I'd probably go with triple tap, but I would definitely prefer rapid hit. The Rose is just better. And next up is the Ikelos hand cannon. I'm putting in the B tier, surprisingly above the D.F.A. Now this weapon doesn't get an explosive perk, so why am I rating it this highly? Well, because Subsistence and Frenzy is my personal favorite 2 perk combination you can have on a PvE primary. That roll is excellent for ad clear. Subsistence reloads 2 bullets back into your magazine on final blows, and Frenzy grants you plus 100 reload speed in addition to 15% damage. So with these 2 perks together, it just makes the weapon so efficient. You can just steamroll through ads and not have to reload, and when you do have to reload, it happens very quickly. It's just a no-brainer. But then some of you may be like, Maven, who even cares? It's just a 180 RPM hand cannon. Well, I used to think the same exact way. I had no respect for the 180s. I thought they were garbage. But every time I do hand cannon comparisons, whether it be for a video or just personally, the 180s often outperform a lot of the other hand cannons, to my surprise. Now obviously if you're doing higher level content and you need range, the 180s are going to be lacking. But in like low to mid level content, when you're battling at close quarters, like from around 0 to 35 meters, the 180s are going to be pretty solid. Seriously, if you're somebody who doesn't use 180s, you really got to give 180s another chance. They'll definitely exceed your expectations. And next up is the Luna's Howl. Now hate on me all you want, but this one's going down to the C tier, but at least it's going above the Epochral Integration. And shameless plug, but I recently did a Luna's Howl God roll review video. I tested out every potential God roll in that video, and I'll link it in the card in the top right corner if you'd like to check it out. And I would say the Luna's Howl is the picture perfect example of the casual player's favorite hand cannon. So for the person who likes to do strikes with friends and go on patrol and help their new light friends through campaigns, this is definitely the hand cannon for you, because, you know, some of the damage perks are lacking for like tougher content, but you got a lot of things that shine in the easy content, like Subsistence and Incandescent. And my favorite rolls in that God roll review video were like Encore and Precision Instrument and Discord and Harmony, perks that really shine in that easier content. But I would say my tier list is biased towards hand cannons that shine in tougher content. Since this one shines in easier content, that's why it's getting ranked a little bit lower. Next up is the Loud Lullaby, and I know the term "you'd be surprised" is like becoming my catchphrase of the video, but you'd be surprised, Loud Lullaby is going up to the A tier. So we're going to be on D2 Foundry for this one because I don't actually have a Loud Lullaby to use in the background gameplay. But anyways, this one's kinetic and also has explosive payload, so automatic bonus credit there. But it also gets Frenzy, the best damage perk, and Subsistence, the best mag perk. So the fact that you can get sub Frenzy or sub payload is absolutely insane. Also has a solid base mag of 8, whereas most 120s have 7, so you have extended mag along with the backup mag, and you can hit that ceiling of 14. Subsistence kills reload 2 bullets back into your mag, so your mag size is going to be massive, so either of these rolls are absolutely insane. It's just the one downside is that it really kicks like a mule because of the base stability of 17, so it's going to feel a lot better on M&K, but not as much on controller. You're really only going to hit like 34 with the right perks. But yeah, with this combination, I'm absolutely shocked that this hand cannon was not super popular. Next up is the Igneous Hammer, and once again, a lot of people are going to hate on me for this, but it's going down to the C tier, but I think it's going to get above the Luna's Howl. Now, yes, it does get Frenzy, it does get Tricore, and it does get Incandescent. These are all fine perks, but there's no explosive payload, and also the old Igneous had Subsistence, and they took it away, and that's the biggest dagger that this weapon got. There's no way to cheese that mag anymore. You're going to have to reload once you waste your maximum 14 mag. You got Rapid Hit, you got Keep Away, you got Waste to boost that reload speed, but it's really not going to be enough to make it actually insane for ad clear. And I can't really tell you what my favorite roll on the new Igneous is because I have like 8 of them saved in my vault and I can't decide which ones to delete. So it's a stat monster and overall a good feeling hand cannon, but it's just not actually good in terms of like gameplay. It just feels good. It's a weird sensation I don't really know how to explain. And next up is the Warden's Law, and I'm sure a lot of you understand why it's getting booted all the way down to the D tier. So yes, this hand cannon is insane with Lucky Pants. It does the most DPS out of any hand cannon in the entire game with paired with Lucky Pants. But we're not talking about pants today. We're just talking about these hand cannons alone as they are. And when you have this hand cannon alone without any help, it really kind of sucks. I mean, 4th time's a charm frenzy is the best roll I can see here, which could be okay, but really leaves a lot to be desired. And next up is the Austringer. I know this one's iconic, but unfortunately it goes down to the D tier, but above the Warden's Law at least. So as always, a little bit of bonus credit for it being kinetic, so it hits a little bit harder. Also has that solid base magazine of 11, just like the Rose. But looking at the perk options, this is definitely more of a PvP hand cannon. As a matter of fact, I am using my PvP roll in the background gameplay because there's no point in really crafting a PvE roll of this. Now my PvE god roll would be triple tap and frenzy, which is okay. I mean, the fact that this hand cannon feels really good because of how stable it is and has a solid base mag size, triple tap can put in the work a little bit, and you know, frenzy's gonna make it hit pretty hard and do some decent DPS. But again, without explosive payload, you're gonna have that range fall off. It's only gonna feel good within like 30 meters really. And next up is a pure poetry, and time to bust out that catchphrase again, but you'd be surprised. This hand cannon is getting to the top of A tier above the Loud Lullaby, highest rank so far. And just like the Loud Lullaby, this is another one of those hand cannons that flew way under the radar. Nobody gave this thing the respect it deserves. Now, looking at the rolls here, there's only one definitive true god roll in my opinion, and it was meant to be because the perks are right next to each other, and that is Ambitious Assassin with Frenzy. Now, I'm not going to go digging for those patch notes, but Ambitious Assassin did get a huge buff. It loads in a lot more ammo than it did before. But when Bungie buffed Ambitious Assassin, it feels like they stopped putting it on weapons. It doesn't really roll on that much stuff anymore, but on the things that do have it, it's insane. One of the reasons why the Every Waking Moment is one of the most underrated SMGs in all of PvE. And I mean, the background gameplay kind of speaks for itself. You can see Ambitious Assassin putting in so much work. There's like multiple times where we have 22 bullets in the magazine, and as a 120 RPM, especially with Frenzy proc, we're outputting some solid ad clear. And with Frenzy proc, and with it being kinetic, and with it being a 120 RPM, and with it having like over 20 bullets in the mag, it's outputting a lot of damage. It's hitting like a truck. It does the job, and it does it well. And next up is the Ancient Gospel, and I'm gonna put this one in the D tier, but I think I'm gonna put it below the Austringer, just giving Austringer a little bit more credit because it's kinetic, and also it just feels very good for some weird reason. And we're gonna go on D2 Foundry again because I do not have an Ancient Gospel stored in my vault. I used to. But this is definitely going to be reissued pretty soon. Probably like sometime in the final shape, they're gonna redo Garden of Salvation and give us new perk rolls. But for now, I would say the god roll is Rapid Hit and Dragonfly, and this thing can get really stable as it is with the right parts. And with a Rapid Hit, you know, you can easily hit that 100 stability. It's going to feel very solid and very easy to land those crits for Dragonfly. But just like the Luna's Howl, it's definitely a hand cannon that's going to shine in very easy content, but it's definitely going to suffer as the difficulty picks up. But yeah, for easy content, it's a very solid roll, not gonna lie. And next up is a targeted redaction, and I should rate this higher, but I really have a personal vendetta with this thing, so I'm ranking it below the Warden's Law in D tier. So this hand cannon does have explosive payload, and it does have frenzy, but I just hate the way this hand cannon feels. I don't know why, there's something about it. It has Exalted Truth syndrome, where there's just like nothing really noteworthy in the third column. And it just feels very sluggish, kicks like a mule, reloads very slow. It just doesn't feel good. I'm sure it could feel a lot better if you have Frenzy and well-rounded proc, and I'm sure that's an okay role maybe for like a Gear Falcon's Hauberk build or something, but I don't know. I just hate the way this hand cannon feels. Next up is the Posterity, and this one I'll put in the low A tier. And everyone who knows this hand cannon knows exactly why it deserves A tier, because it's the only primary weapon in the game that has Volt Shot in the left side column, meaning you can pair it along with a damage perk in the right side column, which just so happens to be Frenzy, which also grants 100 reload speed to synergize perfectly with Volt Shot. Now the roll I'm using in the background gameplay is not the Volt Shot Frenzy roll, because I actually deleted that roll. You might think I'm crazy for deleting using it, but there's actually a hand cannon that we'll talk about later on that does what that can do, but even better. Next up is the bottom dollar, and we'll give it a B for bottom dollar. We'll put it right below the Ikelos hand cannon. Now this hand cannon does get the god roll of subsistence and explosive payload, which is insane, as I've mentioned a million times at this point, but it's not kinetic. So that's why it's not closer to the loud Lullaby, and surprisingly, the kinetic thing makes a huge difference on hand cannons. Now, I believe Subsistence is a little to no downside perk, but the reason a lot of people don't like it, because when you have to deal with the fatter target that won't die in one mag, you're gonna just have to reload as normal. I understand why people don't like it, but when you use it for what it's meant for, which is ad clear, it's absolutely insane. But the downside is definitely heavier on 120s, because when you do eventually have to reload manually, your base reload speed on 120s is very painfully slow. So that's why I feel Subsistence definitely shines more on like the 140s and above. But it's still very, very good on something like this, especially with the Gear Falcon's Hauberk build for the bottom dollar. And next up is Survivor's Epitaph, and another shocker, this one's going right next to the Pure Poetry in the A tier. And the reason this is equal with the Pure Poetry for me is because it has the same exact god roll of Ambitious Assassin and Frenzy. And I sound like a broken record, but Ambitious Assassin is absolutely insane after the buff, and I wish they put it on more weapons, but they just don't. This thing being a 180 RPM has a good base magazine size. You can get up to 19 at max, and the way that multiplies with Ambitious Assassin is insane. So you get like a few kills and you reload, and then suddenly you got 40 something bullets in the magazine. And the fact that this is kinetic along with Frenzy, the 15% damage buff, you output a good amount of damage as well. And unfortunately, that's not the role I'm using in the background gameplay. I don't have it, it's never dropped for me. But if you have any extra Crucible engrams to spare, I recommend getting this if you don't care about focusing anything else at the moment, because it's definitely a fun thing to try out. It will not disappoint, trust me. And if you want to see how it works out, just look at the Pure Poetry clip from earlier, because it's basically the same thing, just in the form of a 120. And next up is the Frontier's Cry, and this one will go in the D tier right below the Warden's Law. And again on D2 Foundry, because I do not have it, but I did once have the God Roll before, which I believe is Stats for All and One for All. They proc in the same exact way by damaging 3 targets, but I just do not like these perks because they change the way you play the game. Because when I start shooting a target, I like to finish off that target before moving on to another one, and in that time, I lose the activation for these. But when you do get them to activate, it does make the gun feel very good, I'll admit. But I just do not like how they make you play the game, because it's just not natural to me. And moving on to the Fatebringer, and ladies and gentlemen, we have our very first S tier hand cannon. Let's go. So this was my main hand cannon for years, ever since it came out. And unfortunately, I'm gonna have to delete it after this video because another hand cannon came out that's better. We'll talk about that later. But anyways, I sound like a broken record, but explosive payload / time payload is the best perk you can have on a hand cannon. And Frenzy is the best damage perk for a PvE primary. And the fact that you can get these together, and the fact that this is also a kinetic weapon, is insane. Explosive Payload Frenzy is the best possible perk combination you can have on a hand cannon for a wide multitude of content and difficulties. It's 100% deserving of an S tier placement. And next up is the Word of Crota. This one's going up to the B tier right above the Ikelos hand cannon. Now this and the Ikelos hand cannon are extremely comparable. They're both void 180 RPM hand cannons that get the god roll of Subsistence and Frenzy. So what's the difference? Well, I believe the Word of Crota is a little bit better because the Cursed Thrall origin trait is pretty solid, especially for like a grapple spam build like I'm on at the moment. I mean, I'm not utilizing it because I'm doing a fair comparison, but still, Cursed Thrall is definitely better than what the Ikelos has. But not only that, you also have the option of having Dragonfly in the first column to pair along with Frenzy. There are some people out there who do not like Subsistence, so Dragonfly Frenzy is a very solid ad clear roll as well. And when you have the Dragonfly explosion along with the Cursed Thrall origin explosion at the same time, it gets pretty dang explosive, I'll admit. And next up is the True Prophecy. Now, depending on what type of player you are, this is either S tier or the bottom of B tier. For me, it's going to be the bottom of B tier. And once again, I did not save any of these, so we're on D2 Foundry. Now, it is kinetic and it does get explosive and time payload. However, in the first column, It does get overflow, which some people see as like an S plus tier weapon, because with a appended mag and a backup mag, you can hit the maximum 14 in the magazine, so you run over a brick of special or heavy, and you can get up to 28 ammo in the magazine, and you can proc that just by having like a special finisher setup. So having 28 bullets along with like explosive payload is pretty nutty, and you're gonna output a lot of damage, but I just do not like overflow because I just don't find it to be very consistent, because like it doesn't proc when I want it to. It just feels like ammo is super abundant, it's just always there, but for some reason whenever I use an overflow weapon, suddenly I just do not get the brick when I want it to drop. It's just never there, and it's just like it never comes in clutch. And next up is the combined action, and maybe this is wrong, but I'm gonna rank it at the lowest so far, at the very bottom of D tier. Now yes, it does have timed payload, but it's not kinetic, makes a difference. It does have Volt Shot, which is an S tier ad clear perk, so why is it rated so low? Well, you want to pair Volt Shot along with some kind of reload speed synergy, and Eddy Current is not a good reload perk, and everything else in the first column sucks, at least for PvE. I mean, you can't have Flared Magwell with the reload masterwork, and you do have the field tested origin trade, but it's a 120 RPM. There's animations, it's just not going to be fast regardless. It just feels like trash, and I would dare say that I would use the targeted redaction before I use this. And next up is the Optative. Now I'm kind of torn whether I want to put this above the Ikelos hand cannon and Word of Crota, or if I want to put it below them. And I think I'm gonna put it below them. Now this is probably the only weapon I'll rank today without a damage perk. I mean, it does get a damage perk, it gets Golden Tricorn, but the role we're using in the background gameplay is Rapid Hit and Deconstruct. That's right, no damage perk at all, which basically breaks my own rulebook. But Deconstruct gives you a very large base magazine size, because as you deal sustained damage, it reloads bullets back into your mag. Now, I didn't pay attention, I didn't count the bullets, I didn't look at the footage, but I believe it's like 3 or 4 shots that reloads a bullet back into your mag. Overall, you have like a 30 round mag, give or take, but even more because of the origin trait. The nano sub munitions, when you're near an ally, you get your ammo refunded when your mag runs out. So you have like a 40 bullet mag with this weapon as a 180 RPM hand cannon, and Rapid Hit makes the gun feel pretty juicy, which is the reason why the Rose feels very good. So while we don't have a damage perk here, it does kind of make up for it by just having like a 40 round magazine just by default. So it'd be pretty good for like a Gear Falcon's Hauberk build. And next up we got the Nation of Beasts, which I'll put right above the Frontier's Cry, I think. So for this one, the god roll is easily going to be Subsistence and Dragonfly. But you gotta get crit kills for this, and it being an energy 180 as opposed to something like a kinetic 120, it's gonna be a lot harder in comparison to like farm precision kills. It's just not gonna hit as hard, that's the problem. Plus it's an arc weapon, so if you wanted arc subclass synergy, you would definitely use Volt Shot over Dragonfly, because then you would actually have subclass synergy. And next up is a Kept Confidence. This thing's getting slammed down into the D tier, right below the Exalted Truth. Now this one has the same problem as the Austringer and Exalted Truth, where it's definitely a hand cannon more geared towards PvP. That's just how it was designed, and it has a lot to be desired when it comes to PvE. So the main benefit this weapon has is the fact that it's strand, so it can take advantage of unraveling rounds and like propagation and stuff like that, which is why the god roll I would say is like loose change, because it'll be easy to proc that with unraveling rounds. And then collective action, because it's easy to like grapple punch something, get a tangle, throw the tangle, get a 20% damage buff. But you're really jumping through hoops to really get this thing to work for like little benefit. There's really not much whatsoever. And why would they put stats for all in this thing without having one for all in the other column? It just makes no sense. This hand cannon is really not meant for PvE. Next up is the Vulpecula, and for one reason and one reason only, this thing's getting put up into the A tier. Now, besides explosive payload, there's only really one thing where this hand cannon earns A tier, and that is the best shoot to loot hand cannon in the entire game. Really, it's the only one, because it's the only one to get shoot to loot in one column and explosive payload in the other column. And explosive payload works with shoot to loot because the area of effect around the explosive payload will work with shoot to loot, picking up all the orbs and ammo around that explosive payload. So it's very, very excellent in content where you would need a stun champion, you need a hand cannon, but you're also doing like a sweaty farm, or like a speed run where you need that shoot to loot to pick up the heavy and orbs, like Onslaught for example. Then this is going to be the best and only option for a hand cannon, because the only other things in the game that get shoot to loot payload are Scout scout rifles, which is the Staccato and the Percy's D. So just simply because of the fact that the Vulpecula does what no other hand cannon can do, it earns its way into A tier. Next up is the Round Robin, and I think I want to put this in B tier, but I thought long and hard and I have no idea where I really want to put it. I feel like I'm going to put it at the top of B tier. But I don't know if that's right. Now, looking at the Round Robin's perk pool, it has a lot of potential, but you really need that subclass synergy to help it out. Because I would say the God roll is really Subsistence and Golden Tricorn, which, like we learned earlier, especially with the Loud Lullaby, it's a pretty good thing to have Subsistence with a damage perk on a 120, because you can just absolutely shred through tons of adds without having to reload. Except with Frenzy, for example, you're only going to have a 15% damage buff, but with Golden Tricorn, you have the potential to turn that into a 50% damage buff if you can get an ability Final Blow in that 7 seconds, which on Strand, it's a lot easier to do that than on any other subclass because Growl Punches are very spammable threat of generation. And Golden Tricorn times 2 lasts like 11 seconds, so having Subsistence plus a 50% damage buff plus Nanotech Tracer Rockets for an 11-second duration, you're just going to be absolutely shredding through adds like a hot knife through butter. And unfortunately, I couldn't show off what it's capable of in the background gameplay because I was using my Crucible roll. But it can be very good. You just need to have synergy with your subclass. And next up is the Annual Skate, and I'm going to put this at the very top of C tier. And the reason this weapon ranks above the Igneous Hammer is simply just because it has time payload. The payload perks are just too good. And this weapon is very reminiscent of the D.F.A. They're basically the same thing. It's just they're both stable hand cannons with time payload that do nothing else. It's just the D.F.A is kinetic and can get adept mods, and the Annual Skate is just solar. And don't ask me why I didn't delete my Annual Skate after years of having it. It's just something about it feels good, just having a perfectly stable hand cannon with the payload perk. It doesn't particularly do anything special, it just feels good, that's it. And next up is a Waking Vigil. This one I think I'll put in B tier right below the Rose. So this is a good example of what the combined action should have been. We got Volt Shot, but this time we actually have good reload perks in the first side column. We got Rapid Hit and we got Perpetual Motion. And it's a 140, so it'll have a faster base reload anyways. And on top of that, you have Flared Magwell with the Reload Masterwork, and you actually got a pretty solid reload speed. And like I said before, Volt Shot is an S tier ad clear perk, so you really can't go wrong with the Waking Vigil. I would say though it's more geared towards like low to mid-level content, but nothing too difficult because, you know, you don't have an explosive perk. Next up, we got the Cantata, and this one will go at the very top of C tier. So this one is basically just the ARC version of the Annual Skate and the D.F.A. It does the same thing, it's just a normal 140 RPM hand cannon that happens to get time payload, and it also gets Rapid Hit in that third column just to make it feel a lot better and reload a lot quicker. So it's kind of like the Rose as well if you think about it. Next up is the Malediction. This one I think I'll put right below the Annual Skate in C tier. Now, as you can see, it's another ritual hand cannon, so it only has a couple perk options, and this one is very reminiscent of the Luna's Howl, because my favorite Luna's Howl god roll was Discord and Harmony. You get a kill with another weapon, you swap to this weapon, and for 7 seconds, Final Blows fully reload your magazine, and you also have a 20% damage buff. But you do need help from your other weapons. It's good to pair with an auto-loading weapon like Explosive Personality or Deafening Whisper, and in that case it's not too bad. But the fact that it's not going to be as good just like standalone, like on its own without help from your other weapon, that's where it takes a hit a little bit and loses some points. But it is kinetic and it can get explosive payload, and Enlightened Action can help out that reload speed, but like I said, animations, it's a 120. No matter how fast your reload speed is, it's still not going to be that fast. So this hand cannon does have a lot of potential, but you really have to use it in the right situation. It's not going to be good all the time. And next up, we got the Midnight Coup, and we finally have our very first best in slot tier hand cannon. So we're going to be comparing this in a lot of ways to the Fatebringer, and this hand cannon is the reason why I'm going to be dismantling my Fatebringer. Rest in peace. But this thing is the new king, 100%. So there are a few things to talk about here. So thing number one, it's kinetic. It's a bonus, 10% more damage. Thing number two, it has the best base magazine size out of any hand cannon in the entire game, which is 12. So you don't even need a backup mag, because if you get it to roll with the pendant mag, you already hit that maximum of 14 bullets, which is amazing. And thing number 3, it also gets the best roll a hand cannon can get, an explosive payload in Frenzy that you can use in a multitude of activities and a lot of content difficulties, all the way up to like Master. But when it comes to Grandmasters, in my opinion, the best possible roll you can get on a hand cannon, period, is explosive payload plus kinetic tremors, and this hand cannon can get that. So you have both of the god rolls for all types of content in the entirety of Destiny 2. So I would say there is not a situation in which the Midnight Coup wouldn't be viable. It's always going to be the best option. This is undoubtedly the best in slot hand cannon for the kinetic slot. And you know, looking at these perk options and looking at that mag size, I don't think it's even possible for Bungie to create a better hand cannon than this in the future. And also, I forgot to mention, it has the Indomitability origin trait, feeding you ability energy as well, whereas the Fatebringer doesn't even have an origin trait. The only one downside I would say about the Midnight Coup is that its stats are pretty bad. That's the one part where it takes a hit. But other than that, everything is perfect. And next up is the Trust. This one goes into the C tier. I think I'm going to put it at the very top of C tier. So it's basically the same as the Rose, the D.F.A, the Cantata, and the Annual Skate, in which it's just a normal hand cannon that just happens to get explosive payload. Except it's a 180 RPM, so it's going to be a lot more stable. It's going to have pretty good reload speed and stability with that surplus, which, just like the roll I have in the Annual Skate, which is surplus and time payload, this one's god roll. For me personally, would be surplus and explosive payload. I could also see rapid hit and explosive payload as well. And it being a 180 RPM, it's going to have 19 in the mag as opposed to the 140 RPMs having 14 in the mag, which can benefit you in some kinds of content. It's just a very solid feeling hand cannon. Again, nothing too special about it, just feels good. Next up is a spare Rations. This one will go in the C tier right above the Malediction. Now scratch what I said about the Midnight Coup having the best base magazine size. I forgot about the spare Rations. It has a base mag of 13, which is excellent. Now it is kinetic, which is a plus, and it does get subsistence, which is a plus, but it doesn't have much to pair with subsistence. It gets swashbuckler, which I don't really enjoy too much. It can be hit or miss. And it does get an awesome synergistic roll of rapid hit with kinetic tremors. That sounds insane, but it's also in a very weird spot for one reason. Kinetic tremors is not a good perk in an ad clear scenario in like low to mid level content, because everything's gonna die before kinetic tremors procs on them. So kinetic tremors is definitely a perk that shines in tougher content like Master to Grandmaster, but in that type of content, you also really want an explosive payload or time payload perk to have that like pseudo infinite range, because range matters in that kind of content. So rapid hit kinetic tremors is still kind of awkward in that kind of content because you'd rather have explosive. So while the spare Rations has access to all these insane perks, they're also kind of awkward in their given areas for very specific reasons like that. And next up is the Eyasluna, and I'll put this one next to the Vulpecula because similar to the Vulpecula, it's very niche, but it's very good at what it does. So the god roll here is Outlaw with Headstone. They're both perks that want you to get a precision kill, so they synergize with each other. But I would say that the Eyasluna has the same problem as the Round Robin, in which for it to be good, you need to have subclass synergy. So you have like the increased area of effect of your stasis crystal being broken and the increased damage, and you can break it in one shot with Whisper of Rending. So on a stasis subclass, the Eyasluna is an absolute ad clear monster. And remember, Whisper of Shards is going to increase your grenade regen massively when you get that Eyasluna crit kill. So very good synergy with stasis, but otherwise it's kind of average. Next up is a Judgment. This one I'll put in the C tier below the Trust. I think I like the Trust just a tiny bit better. And I do not have one of these at the moment, so let's go on over to D2 Foundry. So the Judgment, as you know, got reissued and it lost what was the most important to it, in which it was kinetic before, did 10% more damage, but now it's stasis, so it lost that. And the god roll from before, I would say, was Demolitionist with time payload, but ever since, Demolitionist has been shadow nerf. It's half of what it used to be. It's basically like the Indomitability origin trait now, so it's not really worth running anymore. What you're reading on screen is a lie. Kills don't grant 10% grenade energy, they only grant 5%. It could vary depending on enemy tier. I don't know if that's how it works, but correct me if I'm wrong. The next best roll, in my opinion, is Encore for the feel, probably, along with time payload. That's about it. Some of you might be like, but Maven, what about Headstone? You said the Eyasluna was good, but also gets payload, so isn't that insane? It's not. This is actually anti-synergy because the damage is split. And the payload portion of the damage does not count as a crit, it counts as a body shot. So you're having less of your damage accounted towards the crit, making it less likely that you're going to proc headstone. So that's actually bad synergy. It also has a poor base magazine size of 9, just like the D.F.A, but unlike the D.F.A, it doesn't get adept mods. And also the base stats of the Judgment really suck. And the last time I did a hand cannon tier list video, I rated the Judgment extremely highly. Like, I forget what it was, but it was like either S tier or high A tier. But oh, have the mighty have fallen. It's not what it used to be. And next up is a Zaouli's Bane, and I'm sure you can already predict where the heck this thing's gonna go. Yes, we got our second best in slot hand cannon. This is without a doubt the best hand cannon in the energy slot, and I don't think really anybody can dispute that. You might as well just call this thing collateral damage the hand cannon. The combination of explosive payload with incandescent is very destructive. That is a lot of damage being spread around to targets right there. And I know we just talked about the spare rations being the best base magazine size a 140 RPM hand cannon can get, but technically the Zaouli's Bane does because of the runneth over origin trait. You reload next to a teammate and suddenly you get some extra bullets loaded into your magazine. And I would say in most activities you do, you're gonna have a teammate around you. So yeah, the Zaouli's Bane, easily the best in slot in the energy slot. It probably has some of the most potent ad clear that a hand cannon can possibly get until the day we get something with explosive payload and volt shot. Even then, I don't know, we'd have to do a comparison to be close, but incandescent explosive payload is almost as good as it can possibly get. Next up is a Dire Promise. This one's going all the way down in D tier. I put it above the combined action because the combined action is probably the last hand cannon I would ever use. So we've had a lot of moments today where a hand cannon has a perk column that leaves a lot to be desired. The Dire Promise leaves a lot to be desired in both columns, I would say. Now again, some people live and die by overflow. Personally, I do not like this perk. Swashbuckler is a fine, strong damage perk, you know, 33% damage, but I just don't like its timer. It only lasts like 4 seconds. Not a fan of that. There's just really nothing here worthy of note. It's just a 140 RPM kinetic hand cannon. That's it. Next up, we have the Nation of Beasts, and we got ourselves our second S tier hand cannon. And oh boy, the Nation of Beasts is the definition of a workhorse hand cannon. You got options. You got explosive payload. However, the god roll, in my opinion, what this thing really shines with is heavy ad clear with Dragonfly and Volt Shot. That is a very, very explosive roll. When you have Volt Shot procced and you get a crit kill for Dragonfly, nothing in the vicinity is surviving. It is incredibly deadly. So while this hand cannon may not be the best for like master or GM content, in the content that it is meant for, like low to mid level, like heavy ad clear content, it shines very brightly. Trust me, if you have not tried out the Dragonfly Volt Shot roll, go craft this thing right now. It's super, super good. And remember, you're gonna need reload speed for Volt Shot, and the explosive packed origin trait synergizes with that perfectly. You can also use an exotic like Ophidian Aspect or Speedloader Slacks to make the gun feel even better. Trust me, give it a try. And next up is a 7 Seraph Officer's Revolver, and I'm sad to say that this is now low D tier, one of the worst hand cannons in the entire game. And I just want you to take a close look at the background gameplay as I talk about this one, because this was easily the top performing hand cannon in the background gameplay of the day. It is absolutely insane. But this hand cannon that I'm using in the background gameplay is the old 7 Seraph Officer's Revolver. This was an S+ tier hand cannon before. Back in the day, this was actually the king of hand cannons in PvE. It was the most popular hand cannon. It was the best one. It was capable of making war mine cells. Ambitious Assassin with time payload is absolutely nuts. And now look at the perk options and look at how they massacred my boy. There's no more time payload. It's just completely useless now. I mean, you still got the Lucky Pants God roll of 4 times a charm and Vorpal, but standalone, oh my goodness, it's trash. They really massacred this thing. Why would they take off time payload? But yeah, just before, I mean, look at the gameplay. We easily get like 40 something bullets in the magazine, and with it being kinetic and with it being very controllable and like time payload, it was amazing, and we absolutely just shred through things. I'm very fortunate that I still have this old one. But I'm very sorry to those of you out there who can never experience this joy, because this thing was an absolute monster. Easily one of the best hand cannons in the entire game, still is. It's just that you can't get the old one anymore. I want to know who's responsible at Bungie for saying, yeah, let's take out time payload and put in perfect float in the right side column. Yeah, that's a good idea. Like, sure, I'm sad about Igneous Hammer losing subsistence, but this one hurts even deeper, seriously. And the final hand cannon of the day is a Crisis Inverted, which I'll put right next to the Frontier's Cry because they both get the same god roll. I don't get how they gave this thing like 12 perks in each column, yet it doesn't even have a decent roll. I guess Demo Junkie's a fine synergy combo and Stats for All, One for All, and Rapid Hit Focus Fury, I guess, but it's just like none of these really call out to me. There's nothing really worthy to talk about here. So this is the final outcome here. I know there's stuff high up that are like meant for like low to mid level ad clear, like Nation of Beasts, Eyasluna, Posterity, and then Vulpecula can be pretty niche at what it does. I did say earlier I would rank based on, like, I have a bias towards hand cannons that are geared for endgame content, so in that sense, everything that has like explosive or time payload down below should be rated higher. I feel like that wouldn't really be fair though. I decided to just like gravitate towards ranking them based on how good they are in their given content, in their given area, because there's some things that are very good at what they do, so I felt like I had to rank them appropriately in that sense. Like, I know there's a lot of people out there who would like throw all the incandescent hand cannons like way up top like this. Like I understand where you're getting at, like sub incandescent can be nutty for ad clear. I understand, like, to each their own, but if you have any conflicting opinions, if I rated something wrong, let me know down below in the comments and feel free to discuss all you want. I'd be happy to go down there and reply to a bunch of you guys, have a conversation, let me know what you think. So that's finally gonna do it for the video. I'm so just relieved that it's finally done. It took several hours of recording and then tons of hours of editing, going through all of that footage and chopping it up, and then doing a lot of Photoshop work, getting the graphics done. So like I said in the intro, if you appreciate the time and effort I put into this, I'd really appreciate it if you drop a like and a comment. It really goes a long way. And if you are new here, please consider subscribing, as I am on the road to hitting 50k subs by the end of the year. And you can help me get there, and thank you so much if you do. And with that, I will catch you in the next video. See you later.